The screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal echoed through the quiet Oakwood Estates parking lot, followed by an eerie silence. Sarah Martinez stood frozen, her hands trembling as she watched Diane Hartwell, known to everyone in the neighborhood as the most notorious HOA board member, step out of her gleaming white Mercedes SUV, which was now wedged against Sarah's meticulously maintained Honda Civic. What should have been a routine Tuesday morning had turned into a nightmare in less than 30 seconds. Diane adjusted her designer sunglasses and surveyed the damage with an expression that was more inconvenienced than concerned. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the side of her phone as she seemingly prepared to document the incident or perhaps craft a narrative that would absolve her of any responsibility. Sarah's mind raced. She had been backing out of her parking space when Diane's SUV came barreling down the narrow lane, clearly exceeding the community's 10-mile-per-hour speed limit. Witnesses from nearby townhouses had already begun to gather, their faces a mix of shock and anticipation. Everyone knew Diane Hartwell, the self-appointed queen of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, a woman who had made it her personal mission to micromanage every aspect of the community. "I don't know what you were thinking," Diane said coldly, her voice dripping with condescension. "You clearly weren't paying attention. This is entirely your fault." The accusation hung in the air, so brazen that it momentarily stunned Sarah into silence. She was a respected high school math teacher known for her precision and attention to detail. The idea that she would be careless while parking was laughable to anyone who knew her. As the morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, Sarah noticed Mr. Rodriguez, her elderly neighbor, stepping forward. At 78, he might have been slow to move, but his eyes were sharp. "That's not what I saw," he called out, his voice firm and unwavering. "You were speeding, Miss Hartwell. I was watering my plants and saw the entire thing." Diane's composure flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression of panic that disappeared as quickly as it had emerged. She turned to Mr. Rodriguez, her tone shifting from accusatory to saccharine. "I'm sure you must be mistaken. These things happen so quickly, after all." But Sarah knew this was about more than just a parking lot collision. This was a moment that would define her relationship with the HOA and with Diane Hartwell in particular. The damage to her car was significant. The driver's side was crushed, the door barely hanging on its hinges. Repair estimates would later reveal over $6,500 in damages. What Diane didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just going to be another passive victim. A meticulous record keeper by nature, she had already snapped photos of the accident scene, captured witness statements, and was mentally preparing for the battle ahead. The parking lot slowly cleared, leaving Sarah standing beside her damaged car, a quiet determination replacing her initial shock. This was far from over. In fact, it was just the beginning of a conflict that would test the limits of community rules, personal integrity, and the true meaning of justice. Little did Diane know, she had just picked a fight with the wrong person. 2 weeks after the collision, Sarah found herself facing an even more infuriating challenge. The official response from the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association arrived in a crisp white envelope that seemed to radiate smugness. Diane Hartwell's fingerprints were all over the communication. A masterclass in bureaucratic deflection. The letter, signed by Diane as the board president, categorically denied any responsibility for the parking lot incident. More outrageously, it suggested that Sarah might face penalties for improper parking and failure to maintain proper situational awareness. The accusation was so absurd that Sarah read it 3 times, her mathematician's brain struggling to find any logical basis for such claims. Her first call was to her insurance company, hoping for some support. The claims adjuster, a weary-sounding woman named Margaret, listened patiently before delivering another blow. "The witness statements are crucial," she explained. But the HOA's legal team is notorious for fighting every claim tooth and nail. Mr. Rodriguez proved to be Sarah's unexpected ally. When she visited him to discuss the witness statement, he not only confirmed his account but revealed more. "I've seen Diane Hartwell do this before," he said, leaning forward in his well-worn armchair. 3 years ago, she got a young couple's car and managed to make them look like the problem. They ended up moving out of the community." The pattern was becoming clear. Diane wasn't just defensive. She was systematically intimidating residents to maintain her iron grip on the HOA. Sarah began to document everything. She collected statements from other neighbors who had witnessed similar incidents. Hushed conversations in the community laundry room, nervous glances, stories of petty retributions. A picture was emerging of a toxic power dynamic that had gone unchallenged for years. Her brother, Michael, a lawyer specializing in property disputes, suggested she start building a comprehensive case. "This isn't just about a car accident anymore," he warned during a late-night phone call. "This is about a pattern of behavior that borders on harassment." The HOA board meeting became Sarah's next battleground. Dressed professionally, her documentation meticulously organized, she requested to speak during the open forum. Diane's eyes narrowed as Sarah approached the microphone. a clear indication that this would not be a typical rubber stamp meeting. "I have evidence," Sarah began, her voice steady and clear, "of a collision that was entirely the fault of the HOA board president. I have witness statements, photographic proof, and a clear timeline of events." The room fell silent. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Diane's perfectly composed facade began to crack, revealing the first hint of genuine concern. Sarah knew this was more than a fight about a car repair. This was about standing up to a bully who had terrorized the community for too long. The battle lines were drawn, and she was prepared to see this through to the very end, no matter what it took. The real war was just beginning. The next 6 weeks became a blur of legal consultations, evidence gathering, and strategic planning. Sarah's brother, Michael, took a personal interest in the case, recognizing it as more than just a simple property dispute. What had started as a parking lot collision had transformed into a David versus Goliath battle against an entrenched HOA power structure. Michael brought in Elena Rodriguez, a local attorney specializing in property law and community disputes. Her first meeting with Sarah was anything but conventional. Spread across her conference room table were photographs, witness statements, HOA meeting minutes, and a detailed timeline of Diane Hartwell's previous confrontations. "This isn't just about your car anymore," Elena explained, pinning a large map of the Oakwood Estates community onto a cork board. Red strings connected various incidents, creating the web of Diane's previous confrontations. "We're building a case that demonstrates a consistent pattern of behavior." The evidence was mounting. Sarah had meticulously collected everything: security camera footage from nearby buildings, statements from longtime residents who had suffered similar treatment, and a comprehensive record of Diane's HOA board decisions that seemed increasingly arbitrary and self-serving. Mr. Rodriguez became an unexpected treasure trove of information. He produced a folder of documents he'd been quietly collecting for years: incidents of HOA overreach, complaints that had been mysteriously buried, and a trail of intimidation that stretched back nearly a decade. "She's been doing this for years," the elderly man confided to Sarah and Michael, but nobody ever had the courage to stand up to her. The turning point came during a deposition preparation session. Elena uncovered a critical piece of information. Diane had a history of similar incidents in 2 previous communities, settlements that had been quietly resolved with non-disclosure agreements. These weren't just isolated events, they were a systemic pattern of behavior. Sarah's professional background as a math teacher proved invaluable. She approached the case with the same analytical precision she used in her classroom. Spreadsheets documented every expense, every communication, every potential impact of the collision. She calculated not just the physical damage to her car, but the emotional toll and potential professional disruption. Michael brought in a private investigator to do a deeper background check on Diane Hartwell. The results were eye-opening. Beyond the HOA, Diane had a pattern of aggressive behavior in her professional and personal life. A string of lawsuits, complaints, and settlements that painted a disturbing picture. The legal team began to see the case as more than a simple property dispute. This was about accountability, about standing up to a bully who had operated unchecked for too long. As the court date approached, Sarah felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. This was no longer just about her damaged car. It was about justice for an entire community that had been silenced for years. Diane Hartwell had picked the wrong person to mess with, and she was about to find out just how big a mistake she had made. The quiet, methodical math teacher was about to become the HOA's worst nightmare. The county courthouse buzzed with an unusual energy on the morning of the trial. Sarah Martinez sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Across the room, Diane Hartwell arrived with an entourage of HOA board members and a high-powered legal team that looked more like a corporate invasion than a simple legal representation. Elena Rodriguez's opening statement was a masterpiece of legal strategy. She methodically laid out the pattern of behavior, the witness testimonies, and the photographic evidence that painted a damning picture of Diane's repeated misconduct. The courtroom fell silent as Elena walked the jury through the events, her voice calm but commanding. "This is not about a simple car accident," Elena declared. "This is about a systemic pattern of bullying, intimidation, and abuse of power that has gone unchecked for far too long." Diane's legal team attempted to paint Sarah as an overzealous troublemaker, but Mr. Rodriguez's testimony effectively dismantled their narrative. The 78-year-old veteran spoke with a clarity and conviction that cut through any attempts at misdirection. His account of witnessing the collision was precise, unwavering, and devastatingly credible. The turning point came when the security camera footage was presented. Captured from a nearby business parking lot camera, the video showed Diane's SUV speeding through the Oakwood Estates parking area, dramatically contradicting her claims of careful driving. The timestamp and clear video evidence left no room for interpretation. Michael, working behind the scenes, had uncovered additional evidence of previous settlements in other communities, a pattern of behavior that the judge allowed to be introduced as character evidence. Each revelation seemed to deflate Diane's confident demeanor, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of documented proof. Sarah's own testimony was a model of composure. She spoke about the financial and emotional impact of the collision, detailing not just the car repairs, but the stress and disruption to her professional and personal life. Her mathematical precision in presenting the damages was compelling, transforming her from a victim to a methodical truth seeker. The HOA's legal team began to crack. Their aggressive strategy gave way to desperate attempts to minimize the damage. Objections became less frequent, more desperate. Diane herself looked increasingly uncomfortable, the weight of her past actions finally catching up to her. During a critical moment of cross-examination, Alina Rodriguez produced documentation of Diane's previous HOA violations and settlements, a knockout punch that left the opposing counsel reeling. The narrative of Diane as an upstanding community leader completely unraveled. As the closing arguments began, it was clear the tide had turned. The jury's body language told a story of growing sympathy for Sarah and mounting disapproval of Diane's conduct. What had begun as a simple parking lot collision had transformed into a powerful statement about community accountability and standing up to bullies. Sarah caught Diane's eye across the courtroom. There was no triumph in her gaze, only a quiet determination. This was never about revenge. This was about justice. The jury was about to deliver a verdict that would change everything. The verdict came down like a thunderclap. Not guilty of simple property damage, but guilty of a comprehensive pattern of harassment, misuse of HOA power, and repeated negligent behavior. The jury's decision was decisive, awarding Sarah not just the cost of car repairs, but additional damages that sent a clear message about accountability. Diane Hartwell's world collapsed in that moment. The HOA board, which had once stood solidly behind her, began to crumble. Emergency meetings were called, resignations submitted, and a complete overhaul of the community's governance began to take shape. In the weeks following the trial, Oakwood Estates transformed. Mr. Rodriguez, buoyed by the community's newfound courage, helped organize a comprehensive review of HOA practices. Sarah, reluctant to become a community leader but understanding the necessity, agreed to serve on a temporary oversight committee to help rebuild trust. The financial penalties were significant. Diane was forced to not only pay Sarah's damages but also face multiple civil penalties. Her reputation in the local real estate and community management circles was irreparably damaged. The non-disclosure agreements that had protected her for years were rendered meaningless by the public nature of the trial. For Sarah, the victory was bittersweet. She had never sought to become a hero or a community crusader. Her initial goal had been simple, to hold someone accountable for a parking lot collision. Instead, she had exposed a systemic problem that had oppressed the community for years. Local media picked up the story, transforming it into a case study of community resistance against unchecked power. Other HOA communities began to take notice, implementing more transparent practices and accountability measures. Mr. Rodriguez summed it up best during a community meeting. "One person," he said, "his voice strong despite his age, can make a difference. Sarah showed us that standing up matters." The Oakwood Estates that emerged was fundamentally different. Board meetings became transparent, decisions were made collaboratively, and residents who had once lived in fear now spoke up without hesitation. Sarah returned to her teaching, but something had changed. Her students saw her differently, not just as a math teacher, but as a living example of standing up for what's right. She had shown them that justice isn't about winning, but about persistence, truth, and integrity. Diane Hartwell moved away, her once powerful network of influence completely dismantled. The HOA presidency she had wielded like a weapon was now a cautionary tale told in community management circles. As for Sarah's damaged car, she kept it, a reminder of the journey, carefully repaired but not completely restored. It sat in her parking space as a symbol of resilience, of a battle fought and won not through aggression, but through calm, methodical determination. The parking lot where it all began looked different now. Neighbors talked to each other, looked out for one another. The community had found its voice, and it all started with one person who refused to be intimidated. Sometimes justice is a quiet revolution.